Hi, my name is Monique, or you might know me by niqisax, and I have 5 books that I think every musician should read. They're books I think about all the time and that have really changed the way that I show up as a musician and also just in my day-to-day life. Even people I know who don't really like to read love these books, so I'm really excited to share them with you, and let's get into it. So the first book is called Effortless Mastery by Kenny Werner. Kenny was one of my professors when I was studying at Berklee College of Music, and I took his class called Effortless Mastery. And Kenny is one of those people who is incredibly talented, but in real life and in the book, he breaks it down in a way that's very honest, vulnerable, and real. And in his book, he talks about how you can get over all of your fears when you sit with the instrument every day. So if you're someone that has struggled or is currently struggling with feeling like you're not enough or just performance anxiety, and you just want to feel more comfortable on your instrument and stop feeling hindered by all of these fears, this is the perfect book for you. This is a book that came into my life when I needed it most and really just helped me feel understood and validated in a way that I didn't even know was possible. I felt like I was just playing to satisfy teacher requirements, and I was playing out of a fear of not embarrassing myself rather than just really loving music. And Kenny breaks all of that down in this book in a really honest and refreshing way. His advice can help change the way that you play as a musician and unlock new levels of playing that you may have not even thought possible. And his approach is something that I think is really needed in a lot of music colleges and music education around the world. So I would highly recommend checking out this book. I'll share with you some of my favorite quotes that are found in the book. Music never dies in terrible times. To the contrary, it flourishes. At those times, the essence of what music can provide really comes through. The music that gives strength to deal with the atrocities of the day, a song that can articulate our pain, the dance that plays out our longing, the poetry that restores for us a moment of tranquility or incites us to riot, that's what becomes important. Just before I play, I like to feel that no one has ever played the piano before, that I'm in complete virgin territory, and that every note I play is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. In fear, we expect. With love, we accept. We aren't in touch with our own inner beauty, and so we seek it in our level of play. Self-centeredness, which some musicians suffer from in the extreme, is the wall between us and mastery. I like this quote because a big thing that musicians deal with is this idea of the ego, and Kenny really talks about how to get rid of the ego and how to play with no ego, because even though you may not come off or even seem like a self-centered or egotistical person, it can show up in the smallest of ways, and really being able to identify and get rid of those is just going to really improve your playing in every single aspect. You remember gigs not by how well you played, but how much you let go. Letting go is what Effortless Mastery is all about, and it's a way to really be in the present moment with music and let all of the other things in your mind that are bothering you just vanish. One idea that Kenny Werner talks about, along with that sort of ego that we need to let go, is that when we play something, so often we move on from it too quickly. So for example, if I play through the melody of Fly Me to the Moon, I may be able to get through it once, maybe twice, and then move on. But really, if you want to have mastery over something, you need to be able to play it without thinking. With thinking of something else entirely, you still need to be able to play it. So it's committing something to muscle memory so deeply that you will never be able to mess it up. And that's one of the biggest issues that we have as musicians. We're so overwhelmed by the sheer amount of things we have to practice that we jump from one thing to the next so quickly. But if we can set aside our ego a little bit and just stick with something and realize that we have a lot more work to do on it than just one run through, 2 run throughs, then we're gonna be that much closer to mastery. So that is Effortless Mastery. I would highly recommend checking it out. And also look up Kenny Werner if you don't know who he is already. He's a phenomenal musician that I think you'll really enjoy listening to. The second book I want to talk about is called The Music Lesson by Victor Wooten, A Spiritual Search for Growth Through Music. So if you haven't heard of Victor Wooten, he's one of the best bass players alive. And if you're wondering how he's able to play that well, everything he knew and learned he put into this book. So in The Music Lesson, there is this mentor named Michael who's kind of quirky and a little weird, but he is able to basically show Victor or teach him everything he knows in this really fascinating and spiritual way. One thing I really like is that in this book, whenever he says music, he capitalizes the M and showing a kind of respect for it as its own entity. And I think about this book all the time, even though I read it almost 6 years ago. So one example I really like in the book where he talks about paralleling life with music is he plays a C and a C sharp on the guitar at the same time and asks how it sounds. And the response is that it sounds awful. It's really dissonant. But then he plays the same two notes, but he takes the C up an octave and asks how it sounds now. And the response is that it sounds beautiful because now the C is the major seventh, which is what makes chords sound pretty. What changed? I mean, it's the same two notes, but really it's like the perspective changed. If we can learn to change our perspective and see negative things in a different octave, we may be able to see the beauty in all things and in all situations. In the book, Victor really emphasizes the difference between just doing things rotely because that's what you're supposed to do versus actually making and being involved with music. To the real musician, techniques are nothing more than tools to get you somewhere. We only need to focus on them long enough to find the correct and most efficient ways of doing things. Once we do that, our attention turns back to music. The more we feel music, the faster the technique falls into place. I know musicians who have worked on simple techniques for years with little progress. He shook his head. That is because for years their attention has been on technique, not music. That is a mistake. You can see from this paragraph that the way that he's subtly shifting how we approach music and how we think of it, and really putting music as the priority, not technique as the priority, or articulation, or any small element of it, but music as something that is coming out of us, not just out of our instrument. Overall, this book is written in a really fun and narrative way that's engaging and also had me highlighting almost every page. So I'd really recommend checking this one out. The next book that I want to talk about is written by someone who kind of reminds me of the character Michael in Victor's book. Someone who's kind of quirky and a little different, but who seems to have this masterful knowledge that we can learn so much from. And that person is Rick Rubin, and this is his book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. So Rick Rubin is someone who has worked with some of the biggest names in the music industry. The Beastie Boys, Jay-Z, Kanye West, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Metallica, Linkin Park, Aerosmith, the list just goes on and on. And the coolest part about Rick Rubin is that he actually doesn't play an instrument, and he's even been quoted as not knowing how to work a mixing board. Yet he's so integral in so many of these large artists' music making process because he is just filled with spiritual knowledge and is someone that everybody wants in their studio when they're making their album. This is one of those books where I can usually only read a page or two at a time just because it has so much to think about that I want to stew over every passage to really internalize it because it's just that good. On one page it says, "The ability to look deeply is the root of creativity. To see past the ordinary and mundane, and to get what might otherwise be invisible." With a lot of his writing, I feel like there's so many different ways to interpret it to whatever you need specifically at the time, or whatever you glean from it is the right answer for you. So I almost don't even want to interpret any of these, just because I think they're so open-ended that what I glean from it might not necessarily be what you glean from it, and that's the way that Rick writes. It's so beautiful. Another page says, living life as an artist is a practice. You are either engaging in the practice or you're not. It makes no sense to say you're not good at it. It's like saying I'm not good at being a monk. We tend to think of the artist's work as the output. The real work of the artist is a way of being in the world. Rick also touches on some of the elements that Kenny Werner really focuses on. For example, he says, it's helpful to turn those voices down so you can hear the chime of the cosmic clock ring, reminding you it's your time to participate. Rick Rubin was known as somebody who was hopeful and inspiring, and even helped some artists when they were in deep depression to sort of start finding hope and light come back into their life. Consider your craft as an energy alive in you. It's just as much a part of the cycle of evolution as other living things are. It wants to grow, it wants to flower. To hone your craft is to honor creation. It doesn't matter if you become the best in your field. By practicing to improve, you are fulfilling your ultimate purpose on this planet. So as you can see, this book also dives into some of the more spiritual aspects and kind of goes hand in hand with both Victor Wooten's book and Kenny Werner's book. And I would definitely recommend getting this. It's so nice just even as a coffee table book. You can see the design is really nice on the front cover. And it's one that you can just pick up at any time that you're looking for a little inspiration. So the next two books are not even necessarily music specific, but they're ones that I reference all the time to my students when I'm working with them and teaching them, and when they have questions. The first one that I want to talk about is The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. This book is all about overcoming resistance. He talks about how whenever we're engaging in art or creativity of any kind, we're always going to feel resistance. And that resistance may be separating us from who we really want to be and who we currently are. If you're feeling resistance towards something that you want to do, that means that you really have a lot of love for the thing that you're trying to do, because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's apathy. And so he says feeling resistance means there's love there and something worth doing. And it's basically the battle of light and dark. Some quotes I like in the book from him say, if you find yourself criticizing other people, you're probably doing it out of resistance. When we see others beginning to live their authentic selves, it drives us crazy not having lived our own. As musicians who are navigating this journey of becoming something more than we currently are, and often in spaces where we're surrounded by other musicians, it can be easy to start comparing and looking at others. I love this idea that we don't need to be jealous of somebody else. And if we're feeling that resistance, it really is just an indication that we ourselves need to keep going and keep working to where we ultimately want to get to. So one thing I heard in high school that I think about a lot is at a master class, we asked the presenter, like, how do you know that you're going to make it, right? Because like as musicians, we invest so much time, energy, and money, and we kind of want to guarantee, right? Like, is this all going to be worth it in the end? And the thing he told us was, if you just keep going every day and you never stop, show up every day, you're going to make it. Because just by the nature of what it means to be a musician, there are going to be many, many people who leave and who drop out of being a musician. And that's totally fine if they decide to take that path. But if you know deep within yourself you want to keep going, then you are going to make it. And it's sort of just that reassurance that your efforts aren't in vain, and that if you keep showing up every day, then good things will come out of it. Another quote from his book is, "Don't prepare, begin. Our enemy is not lack of preparation. The enemy is resistance. Our chattering brain produces excess. Start before you're ready. So if you have that song you've been wanting to write but keep procrastinating because you don't feel like you have the right people ready to play, or you don't have enough skills yet or anything like that, this just washes all that away and just says start, because you're going to miss out on so much more by not starting than by starting unprepared. So if you want to overcome resistance and mental blocks, then The Art of War by Steven Pressfield is the book for you, and let me know in the comments if you read it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. The last book I have for you is Atomic Habits by James Clear. This book you've probably heard of. It's been very, very popular, and for good reason. In his book, he talks about specific ways that you can change what you're doing to not reach goals necessarily, but to create systems that really change who you are so that you can maintain long-term success. Some ideas that I take from his book and I tell my students all the time is start with the 2-minute rule. So if you know you need to practice, but you don't want to practice and you don't feel like you have time, or you just feel exhausted, whatever it may be, is just play for 2 minutes. Just get out the horn and do it for 2 minutes, because anyone can do it for 2 minutes. Like, no matter how busy you are, you have 2 minutes in your day that you can do this for. And what usually ends up happening is once you have gotten out the horn and just started playing, you'll want to play a little bit more, and then maybe a little bit more, and a little bit more after that. So that's one thing I like to tell my students when they tell me that they haven't been practicing much that week, or they just haven't really felt the urge to do it. Another idea that he talks about in the book is creating an environment that will help you become who you want to become. So if you want to get better at practicing every day, put your saxophone or your trombone or your bass guitar, whatever instrument you play, put it out somewhere where you can see it and it'll be right in your vision. Because if you can see it, then you'll be thinking of it and it'll be easier to get started rather than it being locked in your case, hidden in the closet. Basically, you want to create as little resistance as possible for you to get the thing started. Another part of having an environment conducive to reaching what you want to become and who you want to be is surround yourself with people who are also doing that. So surround yourself with other musicians who are practicing consistently, who are doing things that you want to do, who are releasing music. And even if you live in a small town or you feel like you can't find people as motivated or as dedicated as you are, the internet is a great place for that. I love following people who I'm inspired by and who are maybe a couple steps ahead of me, because then I can look to them and see, okay, if so-and-so is doing that, then maybe I could do that one day. And just having that sort of environment will really help you. Another idea he talks about is habit tracking. And the way a lot of us musicians do this is by having a practice journal. I talk about this all the time because I think it's so helpful. But start tracking how much you're really practicing each day. What things are you hitting and what things are you missing? By just tracking things, you're gonna start seeing patterns and start seeing ways you can improve and making it more concrete. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to know what you thought about them, or if you have any other book recommendations that I didn't mention, comment them down below and I'd love to read those. If you'd like to see a PDF with all 5 books, where you can get them, and my key takeaways, click the link in the description down below and I'll send you a free PDF where you can have all of that easily accessible. With that being said, thanks so much for watching and I hope you have a great week. Bye!